What's up guys, and welcome to my Archer build guide. Archer is one of the two characters that will be a part of the Fate collab on July 11th and is also the character that will be given up for free. In this video I'm going to be taking you over a kit overview and going over how you need to build him, including best Lightcones, relics, ornaments, and everything you need to know about the stats. And with that being said, let's dive straight in. Archer's basic attack deals quantum damage to a single enemy based off his attack. His skill allows him to enter a state called a circuit connection. In that state, you'll be able to repeatedly fire arrow shots, with each hit doing quantum damage equal to 360% of his attack to one designated enemy, and each shot will increase his damage dealt by his skill by 100% and will be stacked up to 2 times. That will also last until he exits the circuit connection state. The maximum arrow shots you can use in the circuit connection state using his skill is a maximum of 5 times. And also do be sure to note that each shot does consume 2 skill points rather than 1. You can also choose to exit the circuit connection state by just selecting the skill again if you do not want to use all 5 shots. You will be able to stay in the circuit connection state if you do kill a boss and they transition to phase 2, but if you do kill the last enemy of a wave and it goes to the second wave, it will exit the circuit connection state. His ultimate has a massive multiplier dealing quantum damage equal to 100% of his attack to a designated enemy and will gain 2 charges, up to a max of 4. His talent gives Archer access to a follow-up attack that will be launched by consuming a charge, which is procced by your ally hitting the primary target. It deals quantum damage equal to 200% of his attack and also will recover 1 skill point, and if the attack you use by your ally does kill the enemy, it will launch the follow-up attack at a random enemy instead. His technique will immediately put you in combat and will deal quantum damage equal to 200% of his attack to all enemies and gain a charge. Archer's A2 increases the skill point max limit by 2 when he is on the field. His A4 will give him 1 charge entering battle. His A6 will increase his crit damage by 120% for 1 turn if you are gaining a skill point from an ally when you already have over 4. Archer's E1 will allow him to recover 2 skill points when using his skill consecutively 3 times. Meaning you would use the skill 3 times, which would consume up to 6 skill points, and you will get 2 back, so effectively you got a free shot. His E2 will reduce the quantum res by 20% of the enemy you do attack using his ultimate, and will also induce quantum weakness for 2 turns to that enemy. His E4 increases his ultimate damage dealt by 150%, and his E6 allows him to get a skill point every time his turn begins. It also increases the maximum stacks of the damage boost effect provided by a skill by 1, meaning instead of an up to a 200% stack, as each stack is going up to 2 times and each stack increases it by 100%, it is now 3 times, which allows you to get up to 300%. And to top it off, his skill damage now will ignore 20% of the target's defense that you do attack. When we do take a look at his best Lightcone options, his best one is going to be his own signature Lightcone, which will increase the wearer's crit rate by 16%, and when entering combat, if the ally's skill points limit is 6 or higher, increases the wearer's attack by 40%. After each use of the wearer's skill, increases the wearer's attack by 10%, stacking up to 4 times. Crit rate stat stick is super important as you really want to get up to 100% crit rate on him. Missing a crit on these single hitting characters is extremely devastating, so the fact that this Lightcone gives you crit rate is super good. And you're also getting a free 40% increase to attack when entering battle, because if you do remember, his A2 already does increase the skill point limit by 2. So you already have 5 on a default team. With him on the team, you have 7, so you will have 6 or higher, so it does become a free 40% attack increase in battle. And as he is a attack scaling character, that is super good. And his whole playstyle is getting the repeated shots of his ultimate, so he's able to very easily stack this up. Each shot you do will do more damage than the last, at least until you do hit the maximum limit being 4 times. After you do hit the 4 stacks, you will just have the 40% attack for anything after that, which you can only really get 1 more after that anyways. So every shot you do will subsequently gain a 10% increase to the attack damage, which again he utilizes as he does use the skill multiple times in one instance. Overall, making this far and none his best option. Another really good option for him is Dr. Ratio's signature Lightcone, which increases the wearer's crit damage by 20%. For every debuff on the enemy target, the wearer's crit damage against that target additionally increases by 8%, stacking up to 3 times. And when using ultimate to attack an enemy target, the wearer receives the Disputation effect, which will increase the damage dealt by 36% and enable the follow-up attacks to ignore 24% of the target's defense and will last for 2 turns. Crit damage increase is nice. Unfortunately, it does not have a source of crit rate in this Lightcone, so it's going to make him being built a little bit harder. You will also need to run a debuffer with him, which usually isn't a problem because some of his best teams usually always do come with a debuffer, be it Silverwolf or Cypher. And if you're running Triby's zone also does count as a debuff, and it also does impact what Lightcones are using on them and so on. So there's a lot of ways to actually get this on his teams especially. So a free 20% increase to crit damage, and having more debuffs on the enemy target will increase his crit damage dealt to the target by 8%, 16%, or 24%. And once you do use your ultimate, for 2 turns you will get an increase to his overall damage dealt, which will also impact his skill, his ultimate, his follow-up, and so on. And his follow-up specifically will now ignore 24% of the target's defense, which is really good. It's unfortunate that it's just follow-up attacks, but it's still going to be nice. Only reason it is unfortunate is because Archer's follow-up attacks is not his source of damage you want to focus on. You practically want to fully focus on his skill, and if not that, it would usually be ultimate. The follow-up is kind of just there for utility to recover skill points, but at least this will make it do more damage for an overall spread, which is why it's another fantastic option. Another really good option for him is Topaz, the signature Lightcone, which increases the wearer's crit rate by 18% and increases damage dealt by follow-up attacks by 30%. After the wearer uses a follow-up attack, inflicts the enemy with a tamed state that stacks up to 2 times. When allies hit enemy targets under the tamed state, each tamed stack increases crit damage dealt by 12%. So this does provide a crit rate increase that is bigger than his signature by a little bit, so that's nice, and also will further increase the damage of his follow-up attack. And as he does have a follow-up attack, it's very easy to stack up the tamed states. So now anyone on your team will do more crit damage to that enemy. So it's also going to further increase your team's damage, and this also still does apply to him. So he does more damage to that enemy, your team does more damage to that enemy. Let's say Tribute follow-up attacks, any Cypher attack, Silver Wolf attacks, and so on. So it gives a bit of a less personal buff for a more team-centered buff, which is why overall it is still a really good option to use, especially since it also does provide crit rate at least. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect skill or ultimate primarily, it's just a follow-up attack increase, but it is still really good. Another really good Lightcone for him is the Herda Shop Lightcone, which increases the wearer's crit rate by 8%, and increases crit rate against enemies who have less than 50% HP by an extra 8%, and when defeating an enemy, gain a 20% attack increase, and at S5 it becomes a 16% increase, and the value for both the crit rate increases is the same, with a 40% increase to attack when defeating an enemy. As I mentioned, crit rate is super valuable, so a free 16% is the same as the signature, and you can get up to a 32% when you are attacking an enemy that has 50% or less HP. You don't want to really build with the 50% in mind. You can have it for room of error, such as having around 90% crit rate instead, just because you don't want to have a big gap between the first little bit, especially if your archer doesn't do as much damage. If you're missing crits before getting the 50%, it's going to take even longer. So you mainly want to use this as a thing that you do use as a error room, where you're not able to hit 100% crit rate, but you can still get to at least 90 to 92 with good stats. And once you do get to that 50% or lower threshold, it becomes guaranteed. And it's very easy to kill an enemy on the side with Archer, so a free 40% increase to attack at the same time. Overall, making this a really good option you can use. Another really good option is the brand new Battle Pass Lightcone See You at the End, which increases the wearer's crit damage by 24% and increases skill damage and follow-up attack damage dealt by 24%. Can't be S5 right now, but once you are able to get it to, it becomes a 40% increase to crit damage with a 40% increase to damage dealt by follow-up attack and skill. So again, unfortunately, it isn't crit rate, but crit damage is still nice if you're able to get a good crit rate ratio. It will just increase any source of damage he does do when he is critting. And it does primarily focus on his skill damage, increasing the damage up by 40%. So every skill shot you do will deal more damage. Unfortunately, it's not focusing on his ultimate at all. If the follow-up attack was ultimate, it would be a lot better. But it's still increasing a source of damage he does have with the follow-up attack, which why overall it's still a really good option you can use. Another option you still can actually use that he utilizes pretty well is Swordplay, which will increase the damage dealt to an enemy when you are attacking the same enemy, which will stack up to 5 times and dispelled when you change targets. And at S5, it does become 16%. So this will just practically allow you to get a big damage increase attacking the same enemy, which how his skill does work, where you target the same enemy and you just use the shots over and over again. That's also not including your follow-up attack. It becomes easier to stack with that if you place it well with his ultimate as well. So he does have a bunch of ways to stack this up. The only downside is switching it off will make you need to restack it again, so it can get a bit troublesome, but he is still able to utilize this Lightcone. So if you don't have any of the other options, this is the fallback option you would have. When it comes to his best relic sets, overall his best in slot is 4-piece of the Genius set. 2-piece increases quantum damage by 10%. 4-piece will provide 10% defense ignore when dealing damage to an enemy, and additional 10% defense ignore when that enemy does have quantum weakness. The 2-piece increases his overall damage as he does do quantum damage, and the reason Defense Ignore is super good on him / Defense Shred is he already has a good amount of sources of crit damage, he has a good amount of sources of attack, he has a lot of damage dealt. The only thing that he doesn't really have any of is actually Defense Shred / Defense Ignore. So being able to get up to 20% plus one of his best teams always having a debuffer that has defense shred such as Silver Wolf or Cypher Lightcone or Pela even and so on. Usually stacking up a bunch of defense shred / defense ignore is going to significantly increase his damage, as again he is pretty saturated on the other buffs already. This also further becomes the far and none best in slot if you are specifically running Silver Wolf, especially now since you're guaranteed to implant Quantum. And if they already have Quantum weakness, then it's that much better. I'm not saying this set requires you to run Silver Wolf. Even without Silver Wolf, it's still his overall best in slot. So if instead of Silver Wolf, you're running Cypher with their Light Cone, or you're running Pela and so on, or you might have other defense ignore sources such as support Eidolons, overall, it is still his best in slot you want to use. Another set he actually can use is 4-piece Poet set. 2-piece is the same as the Genius set with 10% quantum damage. 4-piece decreases the wearer's speed by 8%, and before entering the battle, if the wearer's speed is lower than 110/95, increases wearer's crit rate by 20% / 32%. And last part you will ignore as he does not have a Memo Spray. So just like Genius, 2-piece increases his overall damage, and the 4-piece, unfortunately, you cannot actually get below 95 with Archer, as his base speed is too high, but you still are able to get that 20% crit rate bonus, which, as I mentioned, crit rate is super important on him. You want to get as close as 100% as possible, and this set makes that easier and allows you to focus on more attack percent and also stuff like crit damage, as on Archer, you really don't build speed ever, so he's actually able to utilize that part of this relic set to get at least a 20% increase to crit rate. It is unfortunate he can't get the full effect, but overall, it's still a really good option you can use, especially if it does help you with your build stats. Another option you can use is a 4-piece Scholar, 2-piece increasing crit rate by 8%, 4-piece increasing damage dealt by ultimate and skill by 20%. After using ultimate, damage dealt by the next skill increases by 25%. 2-piece makes him easier to build as it does help you closer to that 100% crit rate. 4-piece increases his 2 main sources of damage, being his skill especially, and then also ultimate. And also, now next time you do use your skill after using the ultimate, it will make your next skill do even more damage. Not really much to talk about there. It doesn't impact his all sources of damage, but it is his 2 out of the 3 main ones. And the 2-piece is very valuable, making him easier to get to 100% crit rate. Overall, making this another fantastic option. Past that, it would be doing 2-piece. Primarily, you would be doing 2-piece Scholar with 2-piece of either Poet or Genius for the quantum damage. You can do 2-piece of one of those and 2-piece of one of the attack percent increasing sets, so Musketeers, the Dot set, with Soaring or Hero. Or you can do 2-piece of any of those and also do 2-piece Wave Shatter for the crit damage increase by 16% as well. For Planar Ornaments, the main one you want to get is going to be Relic Arena, increasing wearer's crit rate by 8%, and when the wearer does have 70% or higher crit rate, increases basic attack and skill damage by 20%. 70% should not be hard, as again you're trying to get to as close as 100% as possible, and this will increase his skill damage by 20%, which is the main thing you do want to focus on, as practically 98% of his damage comes from that. His ultimate does really good damage, but you still just primarily want to focus on the skill. Follow-up attack is relatively negligible. Again, it's just kind of there for the skill points, so this increasing your skill damage is why it is his best in slot. You still can use Inner Salsado as well. It has the same 8% crit rate increase and a slightly less requirement at 50%. Again, that shouldn't be a problem. But rather than your basic attack and skill, it increases ultimate and follow-up attack damage by 15%. So you're not getting a skill damage increase, but rather your ultimate will do more damage and your follow-up attack will do more damage. I 100% recommend getting a Relic Arena set instead. But if you want the ultimate to do more damage and the follow-up to get a slight damage increase, or you just happen to have insanely good Inner Salsado pieces for him, then you can just use that. The difference between the ornaments isn't super big. It is still generally better to just get a Relic set. But if you just happen to have a really good Salsado set, you can end up just using it. But if you do have to farm one or the other, just go with Relic. When looking at what Mainstats to run, for the body, you are practically always going to use crit rate. The only times you would use crit damage if you have a really good set that has a bunch of crit rate rolls, and it allows you to get to very high, close to 100% crit rate in battle by running a crit damage body at the same time, or you are running the Poet set. Poet set would make it more likely for you to be able to run a actual crit damage body. In those cases, you can use crit damage, but for majority of players and majority of cases, you will be using crit rate. For the feet, you want to run attack percent. For the orb, you want to run quantum damage, and for the link rope, you want to run attack percent. For the substats, First, again, prioritize crit rate. You want to get it to as close as 100% as possible. Missing one crit can absolutely devastate the damage output you do have. So your first goal is going to be getting your archer to 100% crit rate. You can account for any other buffs such as Sparkle Lightcone. If you're using Sunday instead, you can use Sunday's buff as a consideration as well. Primarily, you just want to make sure you first focus on being able to having 100% crit rate in battle consistently. And then past that would be attack percent and crit damage rolls. Remember, Archer does give himself a lot of crit damage, and a lot of his good Lightcones do give attack percent as well. So you can very safely first focus on getting close to 100% crit rate, and then focus on more crit damage rolls. You don't have to get too much crit damage. Getting it to around 140% is already really good. A bit lower than that is still fine, around the 110 to 130% range. Just be sure to get crit rate to 100%. That is going to be your biggest goal, and is going to be the best for his performance. And then for attack, getting it around 3% is going to be good. And that is everything you do need to know to build Archer. If you guys found this video helpful, drop a like, would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all other types of style content. And I'll see you later. Peace out.